Ladies and gentlemen, family and friends, scholars and dignitaries, welcome to another episode. Welcome to my world. So, one of the worst plagues we have in America and throughout the world is drug abuse. It's not just an epidemic, it's a pandemic. Drug use reached an all-time high in the 60s and 70s, but with concerted efforts led by the government and incorporating state and local authorities, parents groups, schools, and even businesses in the private sector, we were able to bring drug abuse down to an all-time low. And that includes both alcohol abuse, tobacco use, marijuana, and other illicit drugs as well. And with some exceptions, it has remained at a relatively low level since those levels of the 1970s, at least until fairly recently. And again, when I speak about drug abuse, I'm really speaking about both alcohol and alcoholism, tobacco use and nicotine addiction, the legal pharmaceuticals, including amphetamines, barbiturates, tranquilizers, and of course now the opioids, and of course the street drugs, including marijuana, cocaine, heroin, meth, speed, hallucinogens, and the other 15 or so classes of street drugs. Together, these chemicals, these substances have destroyed more lives, more families, more communities and neighborhoods than any other social or health dynamic. And yes, friends, we are at war. In fact, 1 in every 4 families suffers from some type of addiction. 1 in every 4 families has suffered some loss or has been totally destroyed because of drug abuse. Now, the damage that COVID-19 has done cannot begin to compare to what drugs have done to our families. Together, the death rates from alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs is greater than that from COVID, heart disease, diabetes, and cancer together. And the other ramifications, the social, personal, and economic costs, far exceeds that of any other social disorder. So the fact is that in the late 60s and early 70s, we began a concerted and unified effort to try to control and eradicate drug abuse. It was to save lives. It was to save families. It was to save our neighborhoods, our communities. We came together as a society, as a country, to try to stop drug abuse. We had to. Now, the reason I'm focusing on this historical perspective is because as of late, a terrible fallacy has arisen that says that the war on drugs has failed and should be abandoned, and nothing can be further from the truth. Certain pro-drug groups say that the war on drugs is antiquated, that it never worked, that it was too costly, it resulted in more damage than it prevented, and that it should be replaced with a more humane treatment approach for addicts, especially for marijuana users. Again, these are good sound bites, and there is a small grain of truth in each. But the fact is that each argument is wrong, and generally it's because we live in a complicated and a very diverse society. So the logical premise supporting these opinions is faulty, but unfortunately, too many people are uninformed about the dynamics of drug abuse and buy into these 30-second sound bites. For instance, one of the dynamics about drug use that is well known is that drug use goes from the lesser drug to the stronger drug, from the lesser amount to the greater amount. This is true not just for the individual, but also for the entire society. It's the nature of addiction. It's progressive. And if you do not actively and consistently, continuously work to suppress, limit, and constrict drug use, it will grow and expand by itself in a geometric fashion, soon taking over the entire society. It's the nature of drug addiction. It grows and expands by itself, as if it has a life unto its own. So let me explain why we need this war on drugs by using several other examples. First, as a comparison, look at the war on poverty started by President Johnson in 1964. The official poverty rate at that time approximated 19%. Today, there is still an unacceptable level of poverty in the United States, one of the wealthiest countries in the world. The poverty rate still stands at about 13%. But did the war on poverty fail? No, not at all. It was tremendously successful. The strategies employed both effectively and significantly decreased the poverty rate for millions and also raised the standard of living and the quality of life for those who still remain in poverty. That is, they have food and in most cases shelter and basic health coverage if needed. So, millions moved from absolute poverty into the medium socioeconomic class, and standard of living, and millions more moved from absolute poverty to relative poverty, where they again had a higher quality of life. And even those who remain at the bottom threshold of poverty still experience a higher standard of living than prior to the war on poverty. The so called war was a descriptive term that encompassed a number of economic and social strategies, and although not perfect, of course, nothing is perfect, overall it was a tremendous success and achieved quite a few of its goals. Another example is the war on illiteracy. The problem with illiteracy and the associated social issues are tremendous, and that's why, beginning in 1985 and even before, numerous presidents began to support reading programs, Head Start programs, remedial training programs. They began to strengthen libraries and supported curricula development initiatives. According to one study by the Department of Education, the level of functional illiteracy in the U.S. decreased to about 14%, and full illiteracy decreased to about 1% of the population. Now, does this mean that the war on illiteracy failed? Not at all. In fact, the level of pure illiteracy dropped significantly from the levels of the 19th century. Furthermore, the increasing rates of school attendance have been reflected in rising proportions of adults completing high school and even college. Progressively, fewer adults have limited their education to completion of the eighth grade, which was typical in the early 20th century, and today 86% of people are high school graduates and 29% hold a 4-year college degree. The war on illiteracy was not perfect and has not been won, but certainly great gains have been made. Similarly, we have a war on cancer. Each year, we spend well over $200 billion in research, prevention, and treatment for cancer. And although it remains a horrific scourge, we have been blessed with new technologies and treatments that have brought significant changes in the incidence of cancer, the quality of cancer care, and especially the survival rates across all categories of cancer. And there remain some promising developments yet for the near future. The war on cancer was not perfect and has not been won, but certainly great gains have been made. Just ask any of the 17 million cancer survivors in the US, and that number is expected to increase by 30% over just these next few years. Similarly, the war on drugs has seen great strides. The term war, again, is a misnomer. That term, war on drugs, was popularized by the media shortly after a press conference given on June 18, 1971, by President Richard Nixon, during which he declared drug abuse, quote, public enemy number one. That message to the Congress included text about devoting more federal resources to the prevention of new addicts and the rehabilitation of those who are addicted. But that part did not receive the same public attention as the term war on drugs. So the term war on drugs has been taken out of context and used in a demeaning manner by pro drug legalization factions. In reality, the war on drugs really does apply to a multi pronged campaign, a comprehensive campaign with several strategies: the prohibition of illegal drug manufacturing, use, and distribution, military aid and military intervention for supply side decreases, also called drug interdiction, local and state law enforcement and criminal justice strategies, and funding for drug prevention and drug treatment programs for demand side decreases. The federal government also has a very strong component to educate within the schools, as well as to fund parent and community anti drug coalitions, effectively giving ownership and control directly to local groups and authorities. The war actually is comprised of a multi pronged effort, a synergistic unification of several distinct and discrete components, and is not just a military operation. Of course, the federal government supports drug abuse prevention and treatment programs and recognizes them as a vital part of the armamentarium of strategies for reducing drug use. But to be most successful, this war does need a multifaceted, multi strategic approach. Drug enthusiasts would have you believe, however, that all that is needed to solve the drug problem are treatment programs for those who do succumb to addiction. But this is sheer fallacy. As well, the question remains, did the war on drugs fail? The answer is a resounding no. Similar to poverty and illiteracy and cancer, this strategy, be it called a war or a campaign or any other name, needs to be constant and dynamic for success. The use of illegal drugs was at an all time high in 1978. Since then, the combination of efforts at all levels, federal, state, and local, brought drug abuse down to a new low for modern society by 2006, and except for specific episodes, has kept it low even until recently. This is especially encouraging since, again, by its nature, drug use is progressive and should have increased significantly over this very period. So instead of increasing, as analysts would predict, it actually was decreased by over 50%, saving tens of millions of lives and years of potential life lost, and millions of families, and saved hundreds of billions of dollars in mental health treatment costs, healthcare costs, criminal justice costs, welfare costs, and business and productivity costs. Now, did the war totally eliminate drug abuse? No, but no strategy or combination of strategies ever will. The goal for the war on poverty, the war on illiteracy, the war on cancer, and the war on drugs is to make significant and realistic progress in reducing these social ills. In no way can anyone articulate with any degree of credibility that these issues will ever be fully resolved. Finally, the question remains, is it worth the investment of a few $1 billion for the research, prevention, treatment, and law enforcement operations to fight drug abuse? Again, the answer is yes. In the overall war on disease, the investment of billions of dollars helps to fight the three most critical health problems for Americans: the cancer epidemic, heart disease, and diabetes. And this war on disease helps to minimize a host of other illnesses and diseases like muscular dystrophy and mental illness. And once in a while, this war even helps to fully eradicate an illness such as polio. Anyone would fully agree that the war against disease and illness is one we have to continue to fund, utilizing the public health model, addressing both the host, the agent, and the environment. With that, the war against illiteracy, the war against poverty, and the war against drugs similarly needs to be maintained. These are the wars we may never totally win, but are the wars our families, our society needs the most. We will never fully win the war on drugs, and we must always be on our guard for a resurgence of drug use. We constantly have new drugs, especially the synthetics, more powerful drugs, and newer ways to deliver them to our youth and young adults. But should we give in to the war on drugs? No. Should we give up on the war of drugs? No. Should we quit the war on drugs? No. Hey, be safe, be well, and God bless.